Looks like we're live according to my system.
We are live.
Okay, well, thank you, everybody. Thank you for joining us as we continue our series on God's amazing creation. And this is going to be lesson number 3. So we have covered 2 lessons already. And lesson number 1, we studied how God put the theme of the Bible in the verse of the Bible, in the first word of the first verse, and that is Bereshit. And the theme was that the Son of the Father will die by his own hand on the cross. And then we went on to lesson number 2, and lesson number 2 was God created the heavens. And we asked the following question: why did he create the heavens? And the answer was very simple: for his glory. And we defined what the word glory means. And glory means the public display of godly attributes. And so the reason why God created such a big universe and all the heavenly hosts was so that they could publicly display his godly or his divine attributes. And so today we're going to go to lesson number 3, and that is God created the earth, or God created the world. So we're going to begin with reading of a few verses, and Steve Wilshire will be reading these passages, and then he'll make some comments every once in a while. Steve?
All right. As you can see the screen with me, it is the 3rd day of creation in Genesis chapter 1, verses 9 through 13. And God said, "Let the waters under the heaven be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear." And it was so. And God called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters called he seas. And God saw that it was good. And God said, "Let the earth bring forth grass, the herb yielding seed, and the fruit tree yielding fruit after his kind, whose seed is in itself upon the earth." And it was so. And the earth brought forth grass and herb yielding seed after his kind, and the tree yielding fruit, whose seed was in itself after his kind. And God saw that it was good. And the evening and the morning were the 3rd day. So this is God defining the lush nature of living things on the earth, living things, plants of all varieties, and providing a way for these plants to propagate themselves and reproduce themselves. And some are herbs, which are for eating, and the others are just grasses. They're just for beauty and to prevent erosion. And this is done after God has formed the seas into their own area. Tino, I'll leave it with you.
Okay, let's move on to the 5th day. Steve?
All right, and then going from the 3rd day to the 5th, and God said, "Let the waters bring forth abundantly the moving creature that hath life, and the fowl that may fly above the earth in the open firmament of heaven." And God created great whales and every living creature that moveth, which the waters brought forth abundantly after their kind, and every winged fowl after his kind. And God saw that it was good. God blessed them, saying, "Be fruitful and multiply, fill the waters and the seas, let fowl multiply in the earth." And the evening and the morning were the 5th day. So God is following the same format that he has presented on the 3rd day with the things that live on the earth, the plant life, and he's provided for their reproduction and for them to fill the earth and it to be lush. And this is done according to each plants kind. And here on the fifth day, we have the seas being populated, and we have the skies being populated, and everything is presented after its kind. You have tremendous variety that he is designing and defining, and he's providing a way where everything can be reproduced, and God looks upon it with pleasure, with joy. He says it is good. And then he pronounces a statement for them to be fruitful, multiply, fill the water of the sea, and let fowl multiply on the earth. So you could just see the birds filling the skies, as well as the sea being full of fish and animal life. And it's a beautiful picture of what I hear commonly of sustainability. It is a beautiful design. Go ahead, Tino.
Okay, and the sixth day, we're getting very busy. On the sixth day, it's a very busy day because God is finishing up with his amazing creation. So, Steve?
All right, we'll have two slides for the sixth day. And God said, let the earth bring forth a living creature after his kind, cattle and creeping thing and beasts of the earth after his kind. And it was so. And God made the beast of the earth after his kind, and cattle after their kind, and everything that creepeth upon the earth after his kind. And God saw that it was good. And God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. Go forward, Tino.
Okay.
So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him. Male and female created he them. And God blessed them, and God said unto them, be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth and subdue it. Have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over every living thing that moveth upon the earth. And God said, behold, I have given you every herb bearing seed, which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree, in the which is the fruit of a tree yielding seed. To you it shall be for meat. And to every beast of the earth, and to every fowl of the air, and to everything that creepeth upon the earth, wherein there is life, I've given every green herb for meat. And it was so. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And the evening and the morning were the sixth day. Here on the sixth day, you have all of the land creatures. And they're called creatures because they were created beings. They're animals of all varieties, but God made a creature that was unique from the animal world, and he called it man. And it's made in his image. It's made male and female. Both the male and the female are created in God's image. And he tells them to be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth, but he gives them an additional charge to be in control or to subdue the earth. And that remains to this day. They are to have dominion over the sea and over the fowl of the air and over every living thing that moves on the earth. And that's not to destroy it. It's not to create havoc on the earth. It's to utilize for good what God has put here, these animals and the entire earth. And then he has directed man in verse 29 to eat these herbs that he's created, and to go to trees and look for the seeds and treat them as edible, these seeds. He calls it meat. would be for them to eat. So he directs them in this way, and there was life everywhere. God has created this, and there's life everywhere, and God looks upon it, and he doesn't just say it's good. He's looking at this entire creation, and he says that it is very good. He's provided tremendous design, sustainability, the ability, the usefulness of everything. And you can just see these early people utilizing herbs for food, for medicine. They're learning how everything is useful for their existence, and they're eating the nuts from the trees. They're utilizing everything for good in the way that God has intended. Go ahead, Tino.
All right. So after God had created a expansive universe, the breadth of which we cannot fully comprehend, and he has made 10 trillion galaxies and put those 10 trillion galaxies into the universe, and he put 100 billion stars into each galaxy, and one of those galaxies is the Milky Way galaxy. And one of those stars, one of the smallest stars in the Milky Way galaxy, is the Earth that God created. And so he created life. He created plants, he created the fish, he created the birds, he created the animals who roam the face of the earth, but he also created his masterpiece, and that is man. And so we come to the following question, and we'll deal with it just a little bit, and then we'll expand on it, because that's the crux of this series of lessons. And that is, so why did God create the earth? For what purpose? Well, we will deal with it in two passages, and we're going to read first in Romans chapter 1. Steve, why don't you read and make a comment on this?
All right. This is the beginning part of the book of Romans, and it describes how man corrupted the earth that God had created. It says, "For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men, who suppress the truth in unrighteousness, because that which is known about God is evident within them, for God made it evident to them. For since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood through what has been made, so that they are without excuse. For even though they knew God, they did not honor him as God or give thanks, but became futile in their speculations, and their foolish heart was darkened. Professing to be wise, they became fools, and exchanged the glory of the incorruptible God for an image in the form of corruptible man, and of birds and four-footed animals and crawling creatures." Mm-hmm. They exchanged the glory of this incorruptible God who cannot be challenged with evil. And they decide that rather than glorifying him and worshiping him, they're going to worship the creation around them, or maybe even themselves. Mm-hmm. And they create images like corruptible man, birds and four-footed animals, and crawling creatures. Mm-hmm. And in so doing, they are putting the emphasis of their attention and their glory in a place where it should not have been. Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Tino.
Yes, and that's a very good point, Steve. And let me let me just kind of give a few examples. And we don't want this lesson to be too long, but it's so important that we can't really give these examples. So based on what Steve said, is that the Apostle Paul is saying that this did not have any excuse because God wrote a book for them. And the book is his creation, that they should have known God's attributes through his creation. And so the example is a man goes outside and he stands at the base of a mountain and he looks up and the mountain extends into the sky for about 6 miles, about 30,000 feet into the sky. And there's absolutely no way this person can say, well, it's by accident, or oh, how tiny is that mountain? He's going to be blown away by the breadth and the magnitude of that mountain. And what's going to point him out to is the fact that there is a powerful creator that created this mountain. And then he can look at flowers and how beautiful these flowers are. And he might be reminded of what Jesus said in Matthew chapter 5, verses 28 to 30, when Jesus said, why do you worry, to his disciples, about what to wear? Look at the lilies of the field. They don't toil nor spin. I'm paraphrasing. He said, even Solomon in his glory day was not arrayed like one of these. And yet, God clothed these lilies, or the grass of the field, that are just here for a very brief period of time. And I think, so when we see the beauty of the flowers, the man that looks at them should think of God's providence, or God's beauty, or God's glory, or God's holiness. That's what it should point me to. And finally, the example is, it's not one of my favorite vegetable, the broccoli, but we can say it is. Broccoli, in order for it to grow, must have soil around it. It must have the nutrients in the soil. It must have bacteria that should convert the nutrients to a form that the broccoli can assimilate to grow and to survive. But if I were to stop there, I will shortchange you on the information that we really need to appreciate from this vegetable. And that is that in order for living things on the face of the earth to survive, we need energy. And that energy is provided to us by the sun. Only green things have a chemical that make them green. They're the only ones that can convert that energy from the sun into a usable form. We cannot. Human beings cannot. Animals cannot. Birds cannot do that. The broccoli will take carbon dioxide, which we don't need, we breathe out, and it will take sunlight and it will convert it into a form where we can get access to that energy from the sun. When we eat the broccoli, we assimilate that, the molecule that the broccoli have made, and then we get access to that energy to a way that we can use it in a usable form, and it will help us to survive, to live. And so when I look at this, and I just don't say, what an accident, but I think about the wisdom of the designer, the creator. What a wise creator that designed all this, that helped me survive by giving these plants to convert the energy from the sun to a form that I can have access to, so that I can live and I can breathe and I can survive. And whatever I get rid of, carbon dioxide, that plant uses. Whatever the plant gets rid of, the oxygen, I use and you use, because we need that to survive. Okay? So creation should point anyone to the creator. And that's how we should glorify this. His creation glorifies him by displaying in a public way his attributes, the power from the mountain, his providence and his beauty and his glory from the flowers, and his wisdom from that broccoli. We have one more to address, and that is Isaiah chapter 43, verses 6 to 7. Steve?
I will say to the north, give them up, and to the south, do not hold them back. Bring my sons from afar and my daughters from the ends of the earth, everyone who is called by my name, and whom I have created for my glory, whom I have formed, even whom I have made. This is a passage that is early in the messianic section of Isaiah, and it's describing for us our role in life, why we are here. And God says, I've formed you and I want you to glorify, to bring me glory. And it's a beautiful thought. Tino?
Okay, so Steve, you read it in Genesis chapter 1, verses 26 to 27. And that is that when God created crown of his creation, he endowed him with his image, right? Steve, let us created man in our image, and the image of God created he him. And so God endowed man with his image. And a lot of times we say that when we talk about God created us in his image, we're talking about the spiritual aspect of man. And I think that's the way I've heard explained so many times. And I understand that. But I think that's just one aspect of it. I'll give an example. Take a look at that man that's standing in front of the sun, and he casts a shadow on the ground. The word for image of God in Latin is imago Dei, but in Hebrew it's B'Tselem Elohim. You don't pronounce the letter B, it's Zlem Elohim, and that is the shadow. God created man in his shadow. And so the idea is that man, the crown of his creation, was endowed with the awesome responsibility of being God's shadow. In the following sense, when you look at the shadow of the man that is cast as he stands in front of the sun, you look at a picture of the real man. And in a sense, we are to be the shadow of God in a way that we will cast a picture of his godly attributes. Isn't that what we have been talking about, Steve? About glory, glorifying God? That's what Isaiah said, right? And his people were created for his glory. In what sense? They have to display his godly attributes. In what sense? Well, from the beginning, God's desire was for his creation, man especially, to be his shadow. And that is to display the real image of God. And so let's close with the following. And I'll say a few words, and Steve, you can say a few words. And that is, it's very important for us to realize that from the beginning, God's desire for man to glorify him, to display publicly his divine attributes, to sort of serve as a shadow of the God that we worship. And so passages like 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 31, where the Apostle Paul said, whatever you do, whether you eat or you drink, Steve, I think anybody can finish this for us, right? Do it to the glory of God. And so as man, as human being, we are endowed with the responsibility of displaying godly attributes in every aspect of our lives. How much of our lives? 100% of it. Whatever we do, whatever we say, whatever we think, however we act, however we treat people, make sure that we are displaying in a public way God's glory, God's attributes to the world. Steve, any closing remarks before we close?
I don't think I could add anything to that, but we do thank everyone for listening to this third lesson in the series, and we'll bring another soon.
All right.
Bye.
Thank you.